So a couple of months ago, I did a timeline on the Poltergeist franchise, and I was kind of surprised at how many questions that I had while I was watching it. I always thought it was sort of a straightforward kind of a franchise, but yeah, I had some questions, and you know what that means. That's right, it's time for unanswered questions on the Poltergeist series. And yeah, if you've ever watched these movies and you had questions and wondered where the answers were, well, they're here. Question number 1. Why not attack earlier? So here's the plot of Poltergeist. There's this family, and they live in this house, and they've lived there for a while. It's established that they haven't been there for a super long time, but it's definitely not like they've just moved in. It's even said the Carol Ann was born in the house, so it's clearly been a number of years. She's 5, so at least 5 years. One day, seemingly at random, a spiritual force enters their TV set and enters the house, causing a number of issues and occurrences. They even try to kill little Robbie, or at least make it seem like they are as a distraction, and kidnap Carol Ann and take her into the walls. Later in the movie, it's revealed that the ghosts are there because they built the development on top of an old Indian burial ground, and instead of removing the bodies and doing it the right way, they simply moved the headstones and not the bodies. So, the question remains, why now? If it's been a number of years that they built the housing plan, why would the spirits wait all that time to go ahead and cause trouble? And besides that, why just the Freelings? I assume that the graveyard is under a number of the houses and not just theirs, so it seems weird that none of the other neighborhood occupants had problems. So there's some stuff that sort of covers this in the movie, since they say that the Freeling family was the first to move into the plan, so they're very clearly the first to inhabit that cursed land. But also the fact that CA was born in the house, and the land kind of marked her and them in a way. This second film tries to explain at least why it's just the Freelings, since their house was built over the graves of the cult, but that doesn't explain why they waited so long. The novelization of the film actually clarifies and says that she had some sort of pure soul, and when she was born, all of the spirits connected with it in a way and had to try to bring her over. So that also explains why they're so focused on the one family, but again, not why they waited so long. Like if they felt her strength right away and were drawn to her, why wait until she's 5 years old to do anything about it? So here's what I think. I think that spirits have been there the whole time, and they may have even made their presence known in smaller ways, unnoticed by the family. But then the beast took an interest. Perhaps he was there the whole time and just didn't have enough power to exert any force onto the real world, and it took the 5 years for it to punch through. When the spirits first enter the house, it does so through the TV, and there's an actual earthquake. Afterwards, Carol Ann says the thing,
"They're here."
and she's right, they're there. And that quake was the physical aftereffects of the effort that the beast had to put into getting there. Question number 2. Who's the ghost on the stairs? Here's an interesting one because it's a question that I don't think a lot of people ask, but it's one that bugged me for a while. There's a part where the Freelings hire a group of paranormal investigators to come to the house to try to document the occurrences and find out what's going on. They set up shop in the house and install a bunch of cameras and gadgets and then hope to record some phenomena. Hey, they do, and then some. While they're there, all of their sensors go off, and at the top of the stairs, there's this big glowy light with wispy tendrils and these little glowing orbs all around. It eventually takes the shape of a blonde woman who floats around wearing some sort of white dress as she approaches the crew before being sucked up into the light. But who is she? What is she doing there? She doesn't reappear in the film and isn't mentioned again. They talk about the other little glowing lights and said that they're people, but they're just these little glow balls. But that other form wasn't. It was a full-fledged manifestation of a woman. Besides the fact that she may or may not be the ghost that gave Ray the blowjob in Ghostbusters, her identity as far as the film series is unknown. However, in that previously mentioned novelization, there's a clear-cut and far more in-depth answer. There, It's said that the woman in white is not actually a ghost at all. The sphere things are ghosts. She's clearly something different. She's an otherworldly being known as the Waiting Woman. See, in the book, which apparently Spielberg has claimed is canon to the saga, brings up the fact that the spirits and the spirit world is more of another dimension that exists alongside ours. The beast is an inhabitant of that dimension, and we'll talk more about that later, but it appears as if the Waiting Woman is also. She's said to be the embodiment of endless patience and is a force of good within that pocket world. The spirits are looking to cross over into the light, and she is constantly giving help to those who want to, but she remains there and is said to simply be waiting for someone referred to as him that she has been waiting for a long time. So he's likely my dad coming back from the store with that milk. Also in the book, the woman is able to communicate with Tangina and tells her that she is protecting Carol Ann and has been working on distracting the beast and other creepsters on the other side that might plague her. Not much is ever said about the woman after this, and there's no information about her in the movies at all, so we can assume that she's still on that other side, still waiting. Hopefully she has a deck of cards or a book or something. Maybe Cold Mountain. Or is that too long? Question number 3. Who is the beast? So this is a question that sort of evolved over the course of the series, but the beast is the villain of the entire franchise and is basically the poltergeist of the title, but it's far, far more than that. It's first mentioned by Carol Ann when she's talking through the TV, and it really freaks her out. And then later, Tangina says that the little girl would likely see the beast as another child, which seems weird because it seemed to scare the crap out of her earlier. But it's also said that the beast isn't the only bad thing on that side, so it would likely be that what scares her is just another spooky resident of the other side, and not the actual beast, who she sees in kid form trying to trick her. And we get more information once again from that novelization. It explains that the beast is a being from that other dimensional world, and it's the living embodiment of greed, and that it's ancient. It says that it's been there, collecting souls of the lost for a very long time, basically just collecting their spirits for its own needs. But then, Carol Ann was born, and whatever powers she possessed, and the light within her proved to be strong enough to serve as some sort of beacon for them. This, of course, angered the beast since he needed those souls, and he wanted to sit on them, like some sort of Jeff Bezos of the other side, just collecting everything he can and then hoarding them for his own use so no one else can be happy. The fact that they lead all of those spirits into the light is what angers it so greatly that it has to come back to take revenge in the finale, as well as coming after the family in the later movies. But then the second film had to play with that. There, it said that the beast is actually just a guy, a dude named Reverend Henry Kane, that was the leader of some sort of cult back in the 19th century and sealed himself and his followers in a cave to die. It's said that this is what the Freeling home is built over, altering the first film a bit. But does it? Are these two separate stories? The novel paints the beast as this eternal and demonic entity that's eons old, and the sequel just makes it a guy who became a demonic power. So those two things appear to be at odds. But what if they aren't? What if that thing on the opposite side of that little old dimensional barrier is what Kane's cult was worshipping? What if their little ceremony all that time ago that they had barricaded themselves in was the inciting incident that alerted the beast to the presence of our world and the availability of human spirits to kick off his collection? And what if that beast really liked the form of that Kane guy because it seemed to be good at bringing it fresh ones? It would explain how a regular dude cult leader would turn into some sort of worm thing or massive tree demon if it weren't actually him and was the true form of the thing. It could turn into whatever it wants and uses its own various forms in manipulative ways. So what's more manipulative than using a persuasive cult leader? Plus, it probably saw him standing there with that gaunt look screaming, "You're all gonna die in there," and was like, "Damn, dude, well, there's nothing I can make out to be creepier than that. So, like, you win."
You're gonna die in there! All of you! You are gonna die!
Question number 4. Why does Tangina tell Carol Ann to run to the light? So, for a while, Carol Ann is trapped in that other dimension. When the paranormal team shows up, they tell them that there's a light there and they tell her to stay away from it. They don't specify, but you can gather from what we know of afterlives and lights that if she went through it, she crosses over to the next plane and would be gone forever. So they tell her not to go there. Then, when Tangina arrives, she's in agreement with everyone else and they make a plan to go in and retrieve the little girl. But then, halfway through, she switches up the game and suddenly tells Carol Ann to go towards the light and even says that her mother will be waiting for her there, which is clearly a lie. But why the mixed signals? Well, first let me explain what the deal is. I believe that it's part of Tangina's greater plan. She recognizes that not only do they have the chance to retrieve Carol Ann and bring her back through, but she also has the opportunity to free a number of trapped souls and strike a blow against a rather nasty supernatural force. Her plan is to do all the things. So, the spirits are drawn to CA because she has a light of her own, and they're drawn to her like moths to a flame. That's why the beast wants her, because she can lead more souls to it. They're not going to go into the actual light because the beast won't let them. But then Tangina tells Carol Ann to go to the light and starts saying that all are welcome, talking directly to the spirits, leading them to cross over. She used the little girl to lead them there, and they followed her presence to the light. So she's not telling Carol Ann to go into the light, but she's telling the spirits to. And they do. They listen to her, and they all cross over, following her, which likely also distracts the beast enough for Mom to grab her and pull her through. Although she's likely helped by the fact that Dad foolishly pulls the thing's head through the closet. But, you might ask, why do it like this? Why just up and do this in the middle of everything and have Steven freak out because he thinks you're telling his daughter to cross over and possibly ruin the whole plan? Why not just tell them what the intention is so that way it all goes smoothly? Well, there's actually 2 reasons for this. The first is that they're literally using their daughter as bait. I'm pretty sure that that's not something you just want to tell someone. That they might have objected and said no to that plan, and then they have to figure out some other way, or just save Carol Ann and let those souls remain slaves to the beast. The other reason is that she may have been unaware of how dialed in the beast was to what they were saying. If she told them that they were using her as bait, it could have heard or detected, so keeping it stum was the best option. Plus, it was a cool scene and added some drama to it all, and isn't that what's truly important? Question number 5. Were the corpses in the pool real? This one's pretty interesting because it's long been this whole urban legend around the movie, and it has a definitive answer that can be attested to in a court of law. There's this moment late in the film in which Diane is in the backyard, and all hell is breaking loose, and she ends up in the spot where they are building a swimming pool, so this area is all dug up. In the pool, a bunch of dead bodies surface, and they're meant to be the bodies of the people that were in the graveyard all those years before. Now, look at these gnarly guys. Look at them. Well, in an interview back in 2002, Jo Beth Williams described the shooting of that scene and stated that she just assumed that they were using prop skeletons and corpses and plastic things. Later, though, she was told that they were, in fact, real, because it was cheaper to use real ones than it was to make skeletons out of rubber or plastic. This was backed up by one of the men who worked in the prop department, and he said that they came from a company called Carolina Biological, and that back then, there really weren't replica skeletons like there are now. So, in order to have them, they'd either have to make these from scratch or use the real deals. But there's actual proof from court documents. You see, there was a lawsuit back in '82 in which a couple of screenwriters said that the script for Poltergeist used parts of a script that they had submitted and they didn't receive credit or payment and took Amblin to court. That suit was settled out of court, but that's not the important part here. The important thing is that in court, under oath, special effects artist Craig Reardon said that he used actual skeletons from people and that the bones were acquired from India. So, what do you know? Frank was telling the truth. But the real question is, did they shell out for the perfect teeth? But there's more to this statement, and here's why it isn't as shocking as you think. When you watch this scene, there are these gross, rotted out corpses that look like that they've been underground for a long, long while. But that's not how they bought them. They didn't buy dead bodies, they bought skeletons. They purchased the things that you see hanging in classrooms and stuff. Clean, polished bones. All of that rot and grossness was added, and they decorated them all up with the grue and the nastiness that you see on screen. So, yeah, they're actual skeletons, but they had to add quite a bit to make them seem like something you'd actually be freaked out by. Question number 6. What happened to Dana? Man, this story sucks, but the movie has the Freeling family, and there's 5 members. Dad Steven, Mom Diane, little Carol Ann, kid Robbie, and teenager Dana. Her character has the least to do in the film since she's not directly attacked by any of the forces at work. In fact, she's missing for a portion of the film since she's freaked out by what's going on and goes to stay with a friend. She goes out again when the finale takes place, only showing back up to the house as everything is ending. So, all in all, she manages to avoid all the shenanigans. Also, I want to point out that as they're packing up, she says that she's going to dinner with Janice and Brian, and she's wearing her hair like this. And when they say that they're staying at a hotel near the highway, this is her reaction.
Just to stay at the Holiday Inn on I-74.
Oh yeah, I remember that place.
And then changes the subject real quick when Mom asks what she said. Later, as she comes back home, just in time to see the house destroyed, her hair is now done like this, and she's sporting some rather extreme curling iron burns on her neck. So it seems like Dana and Brian and, I don't know, maybe even Janice had some stuff going on. But then, in the second film, she's not present, nor is she even mentioned. This is because the actress was sadly killed by a jealous ex-boyfriend, and the filmmakers thought it would be disrespectful to recast the character. I want to point out that the guy who killed her only served 3 years in jail for murdering her, which seems, I don't know, light. So that's why she's not there in real life. But what about in the movie? Well, there's a simple answer for this one, although I have a secondary one that I like better. But the simple one is in the original script for the film. There, they explain that she's off to college, although that scene was cut from the film. But using that, it feels weird that no one even brings her up. So here's the other option, which I like better because it uses some other context from the film. They mention that Dana's 16 years old, and they also say that Diane is 32, which would mean that she had her at 16 herself. But considering that Steven appears to be somewhat older than his wife, that would mean he impregnated an underage girl. This fact is also repeated quite a bit around the internet, mentioning that Diane was a teen mom. But it's not so simple. Apparently, the novelization makes it clear that Dana is in fact not Diane's daughter, and that Steven was previously married, with Dana being a product of that marriage. That would make Diane her stepmom. Now, I'm not totally sold on that being the case in the film, mainly because she calls her mom all throughout, which is not completely unheard of, but not very common with step-parents. But what if that was the case, and she has a real mom out there, and after the events of the first film just decided, hey, I need to get away from all this for a while, and went to go stay with her? That would probably explain why they don't talk about her or show a bit of concern, considering that it may be a bit of a sore spot. Question number 7. How does Taylor know so much about this stuff? The second film introduces a new character, Taylor, and he's a native shaman who shows up at the old Freeling house to help out. He eventually heads to where the family is hiding out in Arizona in order to try to defend them against the return of the beast, as it tries to once again claim Carol Ann. But the weird thing is that he seems to know a whole lot about what's going on, like what the beast is and how to fight against it. But how does he know all this? Is it just some sort of like vague native mysticism? Just a general because magic? Well, believe it or not, but there's a whole bunch more to this story, and it used to be in the film. There were several other scenes that explain the relevance of Taylor, and this was also addressed in the novelization for Poltergeist 2. Before I talk about that, I do want to also mention that it's not the native link to the old burial grounds, because contrary to popular belief, and I even said it earlier in the video, Cuesta Verde was not built on an old native burial ground. In fact, James Cameron's character specifically states that it wasn't. It was just a normal cemetery, and not like Taylor's people. But the cutscenes gave the backstory that Taylor was the reincarnation of a man named Ben Lagoo, a native who was one of Cain's cult. But as they worked together, he came to the realization that Cain was an evil dude and got hold to the wrong stuff, and it told him to get up in a tree and play a leprechaun. Or sorry, go into a cavern and kill everyone. But Ben left the cult before they got to that point, escaping death. Before he left, he saw him able to tap into these dark powers and transform himself, including into a worm, much like we see him do in the movie. So, in the film, when it seems like he knows exactly who Cain is and what he's capable of, it's because he has seen it in a former life. Weirdly, it looks like that he had a different reincarnation between those two, in which he was brought back as a bartender who had a really hard time serving people shots of mezcal for some reason. Question number 8. What happened to Scott in Poltergeist 3? Poltergeist 3 took the franchise in a different direction because it didn't focus on the Freeling family and only brought back Carol Ann. In it, she's sent to live with her rich aunt and uncle in Chicago so that she can go to a school for gifted kids with emotional issues. They have a kid as well, Donna, and she has a boyfriend named Scott. At one point in the movie, Carol Ann, Donna, and Scott are all pulled through to the other side through a puddle. Later, Scott appears in a frozen swimming pool, seemingly let go by the forces there. However, it seems that this is merely an illusion and he's an evil version of Scott and later reveals himself. They then have their big battle with Cain and his forces, and Tangina is there too, in spirit form, because they just randomly kill her off in the middle of it, and she leads Cain through the light, which crosses him over and ends his threat. Everything is then restored to normal and everyone comes back from the other side, and well, Scott's not with them. But why? What happened to that dude? Well, his absence from the scene is partially explained behind the scenes. You see, there was an original ending. Or maybe. That's debated. The director, Gary Sherman, says that when Heather O'Rourke died, they weren't done filming. Because of that, they all wanted to just cancel the film, but the studio heads disagreed. They told the team to either finish the film or other people would be brought on to do it. So, Sherman says they just quickly rewrote the ending and shot it really quick and put a body double in there for Carol Ann, which is why she's hiding her face the entire time. He says that Kip Wentz, who plays Scott, wasn't available and was on the East Coast, which is why he's mysteriously missing. But they had so little interest in the project at this point that they didn't even care to explain his absence. But Wentz remembers it differently. He says he was there in LA while they were shooting and was going to school at USC, and no one even told him that they were shooting the ending. He claims that the original ending was indeed shot, but since it had Heather so prominently featured that they wanted to reshoot it to downplay that. And it seems like that ending was filmed and some bits of it were released on a Blu-ray. There's plenty of behind-the-scenes photos of it, and Scott is featured there and is said to have survived, returning from the other side. But for whatever reason, they reshot it. An editor says that the studio just didn't like the original ending and wanted them to reshoot it. But then Nancy Allen seems to back up Sherman, saying that there wasn't a reshot ending and that they only did a couple of pickup shots and had to use the double since Heather was already gone. Another source says that the ending bit was a reshoot and they didn't have Wentz back in order to save expenses, since his character was deemed to be non-essential. So, regardless of what was filmed when, as it stands in the movie, Scott is absent. So, since we didn't see him cross over into the light with Tangina and Cain, and he didn't make it out with the family, it's safe to say that Scott is still there, on that other side, either waiting to be rescued or perhaps planning a revenge. Maybe he was that lightning at the end, considering it couldn't be Cain as he had already crossed over. Maybe Poltergeist 4 would have been the search for Scott, and it would turn out that he was on the Genesis planet the whole time. Question number 9. Is there really a poltergeist curse? So, for a long time, there's been talk about the poltergeist curse, which is talked about due to the odd amount of deaths that seem to surround the series. There's 3 movies, and 4 of the major cast members died, frequently right after a film was made. Let's review. I mentioned it earlier, but after the first film was shot, a mere couple of months after it was released, Dominique Dunne, who played Dana Freeling, was murdered by a jealous ex-boyfriend. Immediately after filming the second film, Julian Beck, the actor who played Kane, died of stomach cancer, not living to see the film's actual release. About a year after that film came out, Will Sampson, the actor portraying Taylor, also died from complications from a heart-lung transplant. Then, of course, as discussed while they were filming the third film, Heather O'Rourke, Carol Ann herself, died from a tragic instance of septic shock that was possibly related to an earlier misdiagnosis of Crohn's disease. But that's not all, because a while later, Zelda Rubinstein also passed away, but that was in 2010, not connected to the release of any films. So, what's up with this? Why all the death? Is the series actually cursed? Well, no, because curses aren't real. And these deaths aren't all as suspicious as it sounds. Take Beck, for instance. He had been already diagnosed with stomach cancer before he was even cast in the film, and his rather otherworldly and gaunt look was the result of his treatments to battle the disease. And he was literally dying while filming the movie and struggled to get through the shoot, but he was determined to complete the role. So no one was shocked at his death, although they were greatly saddened by it. But then there's Will Sampson, and his death was also not a shock, as he had long suffered from a condition that degenerated his heart, lungs, and skin, and had been ill for years. Not long after filming, they found it necessary to conduct a heart and lung transplant, and his doctors gave him a low chance of survival afterwards, and his illness was known during production. And then Zelda shouldn't even be talked about. She died of natural causes over 2 decades after the third film was out, so it's silly to think of her as part of the curse. And what's also silly is that the source of the curse is said to be the skeletons that we talked about earlier. Somehow, using real skeletons, the kind that have been used in schoolrooms all over and yet didn't cause any curses, did all this. And look, I get it. We like to look for reasons why. Dunn's death was a horrible tragedy. O'Rourke's death was a horrible tragedy. And instead of facing down the actual reasons why these things happen and the ways that they could have actually been avoided, we say it's a curse. It's easier. But yeah, there was 2 horrible things that happened to the actors here, and several things that were sad, but expected. And yes, no curse. Question number 10. Did Spielberg actually direct the film? Ever since the first film came out, there's been this huge debate about who actually directed the film, and a large number of people still think that Steven Spielberg was the director. But it was actually credited to Tobe Hooper, director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with Spielberg only developing the original story, contributing to the screenplay, and serving as one of the producers. But it seems to go further than that, because there's some dispute as to how much Spielberg was actually involved. And there's some that claim that he was the actual director and that Hooper doesn't deserve the credit. So, Poltergeist was filmed around the same time that E.T. was being made, and Spielberg had a thing in his contract with Universal that said that while he was on the film, he couldn't direct anything else. Because of this, he hired Hooper to make this one instead. They had actually been paired up before this, and Hooper was in fact slated to direct E.T. at one point, back when it was called Night Skies, and was more of a horror story. Then it said that this was the idea that Toby pitched to Steven when that didn't happen. So the core concept was his. But there's still the persistent notion that Spielberg himself was responsible for directing and only used Hooper to elude that clause in his contract. The story goes that there's conflicting reports between the cast and crew about who was actually directing the movie. On set, Steven would frequently be present and offer guidance and assistance. And then things got confusing when Spielberg gave an interview to the LA Times in which he said that Toby wasn't a take charge kind of director, and that he would have to jump in and help out, and that they ended up collaborating. The rumors got so strong that the DGA actually opened an investigation into it to see if Spielberg had actually tried claiming the credit through his statements, and their ruling ended up getting Hooper a bit of a payout, since the studio seemed to hype Steven's name up more than his. To clarify it all, Spielberg wrote an open letter to Hooper thanking him for his role on the film and giving him sole credit for directing, although in later years, some cast members undermined that, with Zelda Rubinstein saying that for all of the days that she was on set, Spielberg was running the show. But James Cameron disputed that and said that he considered Hooper the true director, but did back up that Spielberg was always on set, which made for a stressful environment for the director. Hooper himself spoke out about the controversy before his death and said that they were merely rumors that stemmed from one statement that the LA Times made about Spielberg shooting a scene while Hooper was elsewhere, but that he was in charge and directing the movie. But then, the first assistant cameraman weighed in and said that Spielberg directed far more of the movie than Hooper did, and that Toby was just happy to be there and followed along, so the questions continued. But what it seems from all of these conflicting reports is this: Hooper was there on set, calling action and cut and being a director. But Steven was there, like, a lot, and it seems like he was putting in his input, like a producer does. And Toby, being lower on the totem pole than Steven, listened to his producer and did the scenes like he asked. This might make the movie a little more of Spielberg's vision than Hooper's, but it doesn't make him the director. The director is the one and only the great Tobe Hooper. May he rest in peace. So there you have it, 10 answers about the Poltergeist franchise. And yeah, I had more than I thought I would have with these. And I had a few other ones that I didn't even fit into this video. So who knows, maybe there'll be a part 2 down the road. Because yeah, there's more questions about this franchise than I think people realize. But let me know what other questions you have about it. Let me know if you like my answers. Let me know if you have alternate answers to the questions that I've asked. Put that down below. I'd like to hear that. If you like the video, of course, give it the thumbs up. Like that video. If you enjoy the channel, subscribe to it. And hit the bell so you get notified when new videos come out. And also check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines, where you can help support this channel like these guys do. I'd certainly appreciate that, and I also appreciate you watching these videos when they get posted. And there'll be another one very soon, so stay tuned for another great video. Thanks a lot, and bye-bye.